There are many different assistive technologies out in the world today, and the one that we will be discussing and reviewing is the Refreshable Braille display. Before I go into the benefits and what a Refreshable Braille display actually is, I wanted to go over who might actually be using a Refreshable Braille display. A Refreshable Braille display is made for an individual who has trouble seeing even with the help of glasses or other visual correction tools, and it affects the person's educational performance. Then it's considered a visual impairment, and a visible impairment is a disability because it can greatly affect a child's education performance. Blindness is also a disability recognized by the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. Blindness is the inability to see light at all. If a student is blind or has a visual impairment, the computer or reading and writing becomes a really daunting task, as it's almost impossible for the student to use the computer independently, and it can be very difficult to read and write as you cannot see what you are reading or what you are writing or typing on the screen. One thing that should be mentioned is the child or individual needs to be able to read Braille in order to interact with this device, but it can be used to help reinforce Braille learning or the learning of the language Braille. Today we're going to focus on students who have has a visual impairment, or a child who is blind, or a student who is blind who would want to use a Refreshable Braille display to help make their educational performance better and to make using a computer or reading a document or writing a document easier for themselves. A Refreshable Braille display is considered a high-tech assistive technology, and it helps students, as I just said, with a visual impairment. A Braille display is a device that can show what is on the computer screen by raising and lowering pins in the Braille cells. It is refreshable, and what that means is that as the user moves through the document or as the user moves the cursor around the computer, the cells that the individual or student is reading update, continuing to show the user what is on the screen. And Braille displays range from about 18 cells to 80 characters. So about 18 to 80 characters can be seen at one time on the Braille display. It can be used for reading documents and reading the computer screen as the student moves the cursor or goes to the next line in the document. The cells will update and they can read the Braille. But it can also be used for writing. As you can see on the pictures that I have on the screen here, there are 4 keys on the left and 4 keys on the left with a space bar in the middle. And this allows the student to type Braille, as well as read Braille. There are many benefits to using a Refreshable Braille display. As I've mentioned a few times already, it allows the user or the student to read what is on the computer screen. So it allows the user to interact with the computer screen independently. Whereas if they didn't have the Braille display, they would have to rely on somebody to read it for them and know exactly what is on the screen that way, giving the user more freedom, and it can allow them to feel like they're participating in the assignments more that are assigned by a teacher. A major benefit of a refreshable Braille display is during the writing process. Before refreshable Braille displays were available, the editing process in the writing process was very difficult. If you were visually impaired and had to use Braille in order to write your assignments, you would have to wait until the end of the page was completed in order to read your document to find errors, and you would have to start over for the whole page if you found an error. The refreshable Braille display allows you to go back line by line and edit and add things, as it's refreshable and it's on a computer screen, which allows you to edit easier. This is a major benefit because it makes the writing process that more easier and allows it to be quicker and not such a daunting task for the student. Some of the disadvantages of the refreshable Braille display is it's not as fast as speech. So there are devices that will read what is on the computer screen or read to you what the document is saying, and that is obviously a lot faster than when the student has to use their fingers to read Braille line by line. It also ties up your hands when you're reading, so your hands aren't readily available to do other things, whereas if they were using a text-to-speech, it might be faster for them, and your hands would still be available to do other things. So if you're trying to multitask, the refreshable Braille display does not really allow you to do that. It also only allows you to read a single line at a time display, so multiple users have complained that if it's a long document, it doesn't allow them to, in quotation marks, see what the document is going to be about. Whereas if they were doing text-to-speech or had a paper Braille, they could skim through the document much faster. One last benefit is that the pins that are being used to make the Braille characters are very crisp and easy to read, and it allows for children who are learning to read Braille or learning to read in general, it helps them because on paper sometimes it can become mushy and can become pressed in, whereas on a refreshable Braille display that is not the case, and it's always going to be a nice clear display of the Braille. Just to show you a little bit more on how it works, a refreshable Braille display is made up of characters, usually by means of round-tipped raised through holes in a flat surface. The Braille display is connected to the computer, and the computer, as either the cursor is moving through the screen or reading it line by line, it sends information to the Braille display and tells it which pins to raise up so that it will make the Braille characters for the student. And it changes constantly as it goes from the next line to the next line. And there's usually about 18 to 80, depending on which model you have. For pricing, these are typically expensive assistive technologies. They range from about $1,000 to about $5,000, and it really depends on how many characters are being displayed, if it allows you to write as well, which all these on the screen do. This one, the HIMS Braille, which is around almost $5,000, has the QWERTY typing display, which is what a normal computer has. Typically, a common computer that you will get will have the QWERTY keyboard. And so this one allows you to have that with the Braille on top of each key so that the student will know. The other ones have the 4-key device, as I was explaining earlier, and those tend to be a little less expensive, except for the Braille Edge 40. And that's because it has a few different extra features, like it also will read you what you wrote, so that is why it is more expensive than the other ones. I believe that the Refreshable Braille display is a great tool for a student who is visually impaired or blind, as it allows them to interact in their classroom on a computer independently, and they don't need to have someone be there right next to them reading what's on the screen or helping them navigate, as this will allow them to be more independent. I hope that this presentation gave you a little bit more information about what a refreshable Braille display is, how much it's going to cost you, how it made, and some benefits and negatives, so that you can make a judgment on if you want to have this available in your classroom or school or district, and if you think it'll be beneficial to any visually impaired or blind students that you may have in your school.